The door chimed once. It was the soft, hollow kind of chime that always sounded too loud after midnight. The store had been quiet for nearly an hour, just the steady refrigerator hum and the faint electrical buzz from the ceiling lights. I was behind the counter with a half-finished crossword and a paper cup of stale coffee when the woman walked in. She didn't look around the way most late-night customers did. Usually people wandered chips aisle, drinks, maybe cigarettes. They'd stretch the silence with nervous movements, like they were trying to prove the place was normal. This woman walked straight to the counter. Her shoes made almost no sound against the linoleum. When she stopped in front of me, the air felt different, cooler maybe, or thinner. She rested her hands lightly on the counter and said, very clearly, "I'm here for the item that erases you." Her voice was calm, not joking, not curious, just precise. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. "The what?" I said. "The item that erases you." She spoke the words the same way someone might ask for batteries. Or a lighter. Outside, the parking lot lamps cast pale light through the windows. The glass doors reflected the inside of the store. Rows of narrow aisles, the candy rack, the lottery display behind me. Everything looked the same, except the reflection of the woman seemed slightly darker than the rest of the store. Cleared my throat. "I think you've got the wrong place." She shook her head gently. "No," she said. "This is where it's kept." Her eyes moved past me, studying the shelves behind the counter as if she were searching for something very small. "You work the night shift," she added. "Yeah. You started 3 months ago." My fingers paused on the crossword. "That's not hard to guess," I said. But even as I said it, I couldn't remember if that was actually true. 3 months. Maybe 4. Or longer. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once. A soft, irregular pulse. She didn't react. "The item," she said again. "That erases you." The phrase had a strange weight to it, like it had been practiced many times. I leaned sideways and glanced at the cigarette rack. "No idea what you're talking about. It's usually near the counter." Her eyes drifted down to the display of gum and lighters. "You sell many things here that people shouldn't buy." The temperature in the store seemed to dip another degree. The refrigerator motors kicked on all at once. A low mechanical breath. "I think you should try the pharmacy down the road," I said, but my voice sounded thinner than I expected. She tilted her head. "Before we do this," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" I didn't answer. "What is your name?" That should have been easy. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not because I didn't want to answer, because the name wasn't there. It felt like reaching for a word on the tip of your tongue and finding empty air instead. My stomach tightened. "Funny," she murmured. "What?" "You've already lost it." A flicker moved across the security monitor beside the register. I turned to look. The screen showed the aisles in grainy black and white. The camera over the drinks aisle glitched for a second, horizontal lines crawling across the image. Then the shelves looked wrong. Something was missing. A whole section of soda bottles had vanished from the frame. I frowned. That couldn't be right. I had stocked them earlier tonight. Hadn't I? When I looked back at the actual aisle, it was empty too. Just a long metal rack with dust where bottles should have been. "Did you move those?" I asked. The woman didn't turn around. "No." The refrigerator hum deepened again. The lights buzzed louder. "What exactly do you think we sell here?" I said. Her eyes returned to mine. "Removal." "Removal of what?" "Presents." The word settled into the quiet like a stone dropping into deep water. Behind her, the automatic doors reflected the store interior again. But this time something about the reflection felt delayed. When she shifted her hand on the counter, the mirrored version moved a heartbeat later. I blinked. Corrected itself instantly. "People come here when they're tired of being remembered," she said. "Okay," I said slowly. "You're messing with me." "I'm not." Her fingers tapped once on the countertop. "You've sold it before." "I definitely haven't." "Many times." Another flicker passed across the security monitors. This time, the image of the candy aisle stuttered and froze. The labels on the shelves blurred together until they were unreadable. "Look," I said, trying to steady my voice. "If this is some kind of, what do you remember about yesterday?" she asked. The question cut through my sentence. I paused. Yesterday. I tried to picture it. Opening the store. The morning clerk leaving. Stocking shelves. But the images were faint. Washed out. Like photographs that had been left too long in the sun. "See," she said quietly. "You're messing with my head." "No." She leaned forward slightly. "You're being erased." The word hung in the air. Erased. Not killed. Not hurt. Removed. I laughed, but it sounded wrong. "By what?" Her gaze drifted slowly across the store. The aisles. The humming lights. The security monitors. "This place," she said. A sudden pop came from the ceiling. One of the fluorescent tubes went dark. The store dimmed by a narrow strip of shadow. On the monitor beside me, the camera showing the register flickered. For half a second, the counter appeared empty. No clerk, just the cash register sitting alone. I stared at the screen. Then it snapped back. My reflection in the glass door lagged again. This time by 2 seconds. I lifted my hand. The reflection followed after a pause. My chest tightened. "That's not possible," I whispered. The woman's expression softened. "People who buy it usually want a clean disappearance." "You're saying people come here to stop existing?" "Not exactly." She tapped the counter again. "To stop having ever existed." The lights flickered again. Another tube went dark. Half the store was now dimmer than before. In the security monitor, the drinks aisle camera had gone completely black. I turned toward the shelves behind me. The cigarette brands looked wrong. Some labels had no names, just blank white rectangles. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you're almost gone." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean almost?" She watched me carefully. "When I walked in," she said, "you still had a name." My throat felt dry. What's happening to me? The store has already started. I shook my head. Started what? Processing the purchase. The word purchase made my stomach twist. "I didn't buy anything." Her eyes held mine. "Are you sure?" Another section of lights died with a soft click. The aisles beyond the counter slipped into shadow. On the security monitor, the camera showing the entrance flickered. For a moment, the doorway looked empty. No woman. No clerk. Just a quiet store humming under pale lights. Then the image returned. I looked back at her. "Tell me my name," I said. She hesitated. And for the first time, something like uncertainty crossed her face. "I can't remember it," she said softly. The refrigerator hum deepened again. Behind her, the reflection in the glass doors shifted. This time it didn't include the counter. Or me. Just the woman standing alone in the store. She watched my face carefully. "You were supposed to sell it to me," she said. The silence stretched. "What happens when it finishes?" I asked. Her voice was almost gentle. "No one will remember you worked here." The lights flickered again. "And eventually," she added, "no one will remember the store sold anything at all." I looked down at the counter. The crossword puzzle had faded into blank squares. The coffee cup beside it was gone. My hands rested on the surface where they should have been. But for a moment, just a moment, I couldn't see them. I looked back up. The woman was still waiting. Calm, patient, like someone standing at a register for a purchase that had already been rung up. "Did you find it?" she asked quietly. I opened my mouth to answer. But the word store slipped away from my mind, and the sound of the humming lights grew louder, until it was the only thing I could remember. I first noticed it in the freezer door. At that hour, the store was almost silent, the kind of quiet that presses lightly on your ears. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in a thin, electrical whine, and the freezer motors rumbled steadily behind the glass doors like something breathing in its sleep. I was halfway down the frozen foods aisle restocking ice cream bars. The glass doors reflected the aisle behind me. Narrow shelves, bright packaging, the pale strip of linoleum stretching toward the counter. And me. Except the version of me in the reflection was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears sliding down an older face. I froze with the freezer door half open. The cold air spilled out against my arms, prickling my skin. The reflection didn't match the feeling in my chest. I wasn't crying. My eyes felt normal, dry. But the man in the glass, he looked 10, maybe 15 years older. Lines around his eyes, hair thinner, temples grayed. His shoulders sagged as if something heavy rested there, and tears ran slowly down his face. I wiped my eyes out of reflex. Nothing. When I looked back up, he was still crying. The freezer motors deepened, their low vibration filling the aisle. "Okay," I muttered. My voice sounded too loud. I leaned closer to the door. The reflection leaned closer too, but not exactly at the same time. There was a slight delay, a fraction of a second, like a badly synced video. My stomach tightened. I lifted my hand and waved it in front of the glass. The reflection copied the motion, but again just a beat too late, and his expression didn't change. He kept crying. The tears moved slowly down his face, catching the fluorescent light before disappearing into the collar of his uniform. The same uniform I was wearing. A chill crept up my spine that had nothing to do with the freezer. "Very funny," I said quietly. No one answered. The store remained empty. A quiet place after midnight always felt strange. But tonight it felt narrower somehow, like the aisles had closed in a little while I wasn't looking. I shut the freezer door. The seal snapped into place with a soft suction sound. The reflection remained. Older. Crying. I stepped sideways. The reflection followed. But now something else felt wrong. His shoulders trembled slightly. Not from cold. From grief. The kind you can't hold inside. My chest tightened. Watching him cry made something twist inside me. A heavy emotion I couldn't name. Felt like remembering a funeral. Except I couldn't recall who had died. I forced myself to laugh. "Get a grip," I muttered. The sound of the lights flickering overhead broke the silence. A quick stutter of brightness. When the lights steadied again, the reflection had changed. He looked older. Not by much, but enough that the gray in his hair had spread. And his crying had deepened. His mouth opened slightly, like he was trying to speak. I stared at him. "You okay?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The reflection's mouth moved, but the words didn't match mine. His lips formed a slow shape. 3 syllables. I leaned closer to the glass. "What?" The freezer motors kicked louder, the cold air seeping faintly through the seams of the door. The reflection shook his head. A small, broken motion. Then he pressed one trembling hand against the inside of the glass. Exactly where my hand would have been if I'd done the same. I lifted my own hand slowly. He didn't mirror it this time. He was already touching the glass. My pulse quickened. The surface fogged slightly under his palm. But when I looked at the real door, the glass remained perfectly clear. No fog, no warmth, nothing. "You're not real," I said. My voice sounded thinner now. The reflection's lips moved again. More urgently this time. I tried to read the words. "Please, I think. Or maybe stop." I wasn't sure. The lights flickered again. When they steadied, the reflection had aged again. Deeper lines carved into his face. Dark shadows under his eyes. And something worse. A bruise along his jaw. A thin cut across his forehead. The sight made my stomach drop. I touched my own face. Smooth. Unhurt. But the reflection winced as if feeling pain. The freezer motors roared suddenly, louder than before. The sound filled the aisle like a storm building inside metal walls. "What happened to you?" I whispered. The reflection shook his head again. Tears kept coming. Not frantic. Not dramatic. Just endless. Like someone who had been crying for hours. Behind me, something in the store shifted. A faint creak. I turned. The aisle behind me looked longer than I remembered. The shelves stretched further back toward the counter. The lights flickered in uneven patches along the ceiling. When I turned back to the freezer door, the reflection had changed again. Older, much older now. Hair almost entirely gray. The uniform collar loose around a thinner neck. And the crying had stopped. Not because the grief was gone, because something worse had replaced it. Resignation. His eyes looked hollow, like someone who had already accepted something terrible. He mouthed another word. Slow. Careful. I leaned closer. What are you trying to say? His lips formed the shape again. Remember. The word hit me with strange force. Remember what? My chest tightened suddenly with a grief that wasn't mine. Images flickered in the back of my mind. A hospital hallway. A ringing phone. Rain on a windshield. But the details slid away before I could grab them. What am I supposed to remember? I asked. The reflection raised a shaking hand and pointed. Not at me. At the aisle behind me. I turned again. The store was still empty, but something about it felt wrong. The candy display near the end cap looked unfamiliar. The brand logos on the soda cooler seemed slightly off. Like small details had been replaced with something almost identical. The store felt like it was remembering itself incorrectly. I turned back to the freezer door. The reflection was older again. So old the skin along his neck sagged. And now there was blood on his sleeve. Not fresh. Dried. Dark. My breath caught. What did you do? I whispered. He shook his head slowly. Then he pointed again. This time at the freezer door itself. At the glass. I stared at it. For a moment all I saw was the crying old man. Then something else emerged in the reflection behind him. Another figure. Blurred. Standing at the far end of the aisle. Watching. I spun around. The aisle was empty. When I looked back, the second figure was gone. But the reflection had aged one last time. The man looked ancient now. Bent. Exhausted. The tears returned. Slow. Heavy. He leaned close to the glass and mouthed a final sentence. This time I could read it clearly. You forgot. My chest filled suddenly with an aching grief so sharp it nearly dropped me to my knees. But I didn't know what I had forgotten. The freezer motors hummed louder. The lights flickered again. And when the brightness returned, the reflection was normal. Just me. No tears. No age. No injuries. I stared at the glass for a long time, waiting for something to change. Nothing did. The store remained quiet, the aisle narrow and cold. But as I walked back toward the counter, a strange heaviness followed me, like I had left something behind in the freezer. Something important. Something I once knew. And every time I passed the glass doors now, I had the uneasy feeling that the reflection was watching me, waiting to see if I would remember why it had been crying.